Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today is May 11th, 2024, and this is our monthly genealogy program. I'm Jessica Ashton from the Royal Gorge Regional Museum and History Center, and as usual, we are coming to you from City Hall in Canyon City. Today's topic will be on delayed birth certificates, and as always, our volunteer Terri Meeks has put together a wonderful presentation, and I will hand it over to Terri.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. We are going to talk about delayed birth certificates today. What is a delayed birth certificate, and why do we have them? Got it. Let's recall. We have birth records. However, birth records did not come into compliance until the mid to late 1920s. So we have to look at what actually was the history of birth records. In New England, as early as the 1700s, people were registering births with the town, and they were recorded in town records and in town registers. But it's important to remember that there was no national level requirement to record births. The first time we see actual family groups is in the 1850 census, which gives us a framework for families and how they were formed. The states gradually did begin issuing birth certificates, some very early on, others much later. And it wasn't mandatory until the 1920s. And I know in my own family's case, in Texas, for example, one of the siblings in a cousin's family was born in 1923, and she did have a birth certificate. However, her younger brother, who was born in 1927, did not have a birth certificate. So that's one reason we have to think in terms of delayed birth certificates. Birth certificates in general, whether an original or a delayed, are the official documentations of a person's birth date and the place where they were born. Usually on the statewide birth certificate, they have the information also about the parentage. So people that were born before the statewide birth certificates needed to apply for a delayed birth certificate. And in most cases, it was most recently for Social Security. After 1933, when Social Security was instigated, people needed to prove their date and place of birth. It's also interesting to note, though, that birth certificates were needed for passports. You needed to prove your nativity, not only the date that you were born, but the place. You had to prove that you were a United States citizen, and also sometimes for military pensions. The birth registration laws vary by state, and they vary by whether the birth occurred in a recognized medical facility or outside of a medical facility. For example, a hospital versus an in-home birth. Whether there was official medical attendance or whether without, whether only the father or an older sibling was present at the birth, as opposed to like a midwife. So birth certificates may be recorded directly by the state registrar, via court order, or via other means as well. Here in Colorado, registration from 10 days to 1 year from the date of birth are registered on a standard live birth certificate. After the first birthday, but before the 7th birthday, births are registered on a standard live birth certificate, but they are marked with the word delayed. And after 7 years or more, they must be registered on a delayed birth certificate. So even today, you may still run into delayed birth certificates. What is some of the information that is actually recorded on these delayed birth certificates? Obviously, the full name of the person at their time of birth, the date of the birth, and the place of the birth. Hopefully, you get the full name, the maiden name of the mother, and the full name of the father, except in those circumstances where it's either unknown, the father does not take ownership of the child, or there's some complicated family relationship. In terms of a delayed birth certificate, a person or the parent or legal guardian needs to submit signed and notarized forms to the state, and they have to provide the supporting evidence for the date and place of birth. And as we look at the various certificates that I have found, we'll see that that evidence varies greatly. Some of the evidence might be appearance in a U.S. Census record, a record from a family Bible, a church or a christening record. School enrollment records were frequently used, voter registration forms, and sworn affidavits from those that might have been present at the birth. For example, an aunt and uncle, or an older sibling. The record sources, the information that is provided, that information is then abstracted onto an application. And each one of those pieces of evidence is noted on a separate line in the application process. These supporting documents may stay in the files of the state agency issuing the certificate, or they may be returned to the applicant. Since they are transcribed onto the application, in many cases, they are returned to the applicant, but a notary public will certify the information. The official certificate will then say that no prior birth certificate is on file, that he or she has received the evidence supported to establish the facts of the birth, that the abstracted evidence appearing on the certificate reflects the content of the document. This is what the state official needs to verify. If an original birth certificate is subsequently found, the delayed birth certificate becomes null and void and is destroyed. So where can we find these delayed birth certificates? I was a little disappointed in that looking at both Ancestry and Family Search, two major sources that we as genealogists turn to, there really are a very small number of them that are online. There are books where the information has been extracted and placed in usually chronological order. And there may also be card indexes, which will give you this same information. Some are available only at family history library centers, or their affiliate libraries, and they may be in the form of microfilm. So they're not exactly easy to find, especially online. And of course, courthouses. Those are the ultimate place where they are filed. They are kept at the county level, not at the state level. And the delayed birth certificates are usually in separate files from the birth certificates. In the case of women, they may be filed under their maiden names or under their married names. And they may also be recorded in the county in which the person was born. But in many cases, they are also, or they are recorded where the person lived at the time rather than in their birthplace. When looking at for delayed birth certificates, you also might find something that is just simply called an affidavit of birth. You can find certificates for immigrants' births, even though they were born overseas. There are additions and corrections to both birth and death certificates amongst these. You might find court orders listing the names and any changes. And some may appear just like regular birth certificates. They may not have the word delayed recorded on them. There's one set of documents that I happen to find in this, and I don't exactly know why the people or why this one person filled out birth information for all of his people, but it does establish his lineage. And it might have had something to do with proving heirship. When someone passed away, they needed to prove that someone was indeed a member of the family and entitled to any inheritance. They may also be used in the case of adoption. You may find information about adoption and the changing of a name. And you can also find delayed death certificates among these files. When I did enter delayed in the keyword in Ancestry, this was the total file listing of files that came up. So it is indeed a very, very small list that are available online. And in many cases, for those that have large record groups, we see that the delayed records are also filed with the birth records. They do have different sets of dates, and they probably are filed in a specific area within the electronic file. In choosing one, here we see, for example, New Hampshire U.S. birth records, but over on the right, we have the option to choose either a birth certificate or a delayed birth certificate. So we do have two completely different areas to check. So let's start to look at some of these delayed birth certificates. Here is one from the state of New Hampshire, and it is for Frances House Catlin, and she was born in Meriden in the town of Plainfield in the county of Sullivan, New Hampshire, on January 1st of 1869. It gives the full name of her father, Benjamin Rush Catlin, and his birthday place in New York, as well as the full name of her mother, Mary Elizabeth Merill, and she was from New Hampshire. And there's an affidavit. I hereby declare upon oath that the above statements are true to the best of my knowledge and belief. And it is signed by the person who's actually requesting the delayed birth certificate. And you will note that this is 1943 that she is requesting the certificate. So she is approaching that age of Social Security. At the bottom, we see what kinds of proof, the evidence of her birth that she is supplying. She has a school record from the principal. She has a letter from the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and it's a confidential record, and it is filled out in the 1943 timeframe. As I've always encouraged everyone, always look for page 2, if not more. And we see that she also is applying some Oberlin College records. And the Merill kindred in America, a genealogy of her family. Each one of these documents has been examined, and they are abstracting the information that in the various years. Her document was from 1885, the second one from 94, 1890, and finally 1931. The information from those various records, and each one of them are certifying in some way, shape, or form that she was born on January 1st of 1869, and that her parents are indeed those that were listed, that she listed in her application. And the town clerk then certifies that a delayed birth certificate may be issued. Another one also from New Hampshire that's relatively straightforward is Marcia Grace Shaw from Haverhill in Grafton County, born March 7th, on 1887, who her parents are, and the certified copy of a family Bible record, and an affidavit from the Shaw family history. And what's interesting is sometimes the little notes that are provided at the bottom. Lawyer and a court justice of record in the state of New Hampshire, now residing in Candace County of Rockingham in the said state, William Edward Shaw, who these people are that are certifying this birth. Page 2 then tells us that in 1942, these documents have been examined and that they certify that she too was born on March 7th of 1887, and the names of her father and her mother. And the note, document 2, shows that her father was born in Canaan, New Hampshire, November 15th, 1865. So there's a birth record clue for him. And that her mother was born in New Hampshire, and also her grandparents. This is confirmed by the marriage record of William E. Shaw and Eva J. Clifford on file in this office. Eva J. Clifford was home in 1865 in Franklin, New Hampshire. Also, we have a birth record of the registrant's brother, W.E., born in Haverhill on April 20th, 1889. So we get additional family history information on this one application for a delayed birth certificate. Others seem to be relatively straightforward with a lot of blank information. We have this one is from South Carolina, and it is for an African-American gentleman, L. Pate Williams, who was born in December 24th, 1889, and the names of his father and his mother. Here again, we need to make sure we look at page 2. And on this, we find that his father, M.G. Williams, who's at this point 87 years old, and that he has been sworn by the court, and he is certifying that L. Williams, who lives in New York City, not in South Carolina, was indeed born on December 24th, 1889, and that he is the father of the above named L.F. Williams, and he remembers the date of birth. There is also a second affidavit from a D.A. Glenn, who also certifies that he knows the Williams family and that the child was indeed born on December 24th, 1889. The Williams and his family lived with my father, and I have known the family for a long number of years. Here is another delayed birth certificate from Virginia for Margie Estelle John. And she is the first child born of John and his wife, Ella. And we see certified here by Anna M. Henderson, and that a notary public, Grace Ferguson, has reviewed the information, and that Ms. Henderson is a cousin of Margie, and she is the one that is certifying the birth date of 1882. And this one is being filed in 1958. So here again, we're looking at that Social Security age. The statement at the bottom, Gracie Ferguson, notary, certifies that she examined an old Bible containing the following record of the birth, reading thus: Margie E. John, born September 26, 1882. So this is a case where the information has been abstracted. We do not act. Before I say that, oops. We do have the actual transcription. I, Gracie Ferguson, a notary public and for the county of Roanoke, Virginia, do hereby certify that I have examined the old Warren family Bible family record and found the following, and the actual entrance. I'm on the wrong page. I apologize. And she specifically notes in handwriting, knowing his business ability, I feel since he did so the day I was born. And we get Margie Estelle John's actual married name. She is Mrs. Levi Garsh. So we have a cousin certifying, we have documents that have been examined by the court and attached to the information. Here is one. This one is a little confusing to me. We have a Frances Beatty, who is born August 1st of 1857. This is from the state of Tennessee. And we do get the father's name, Isaac Beatty. Person did not know where his father, her father, was born, or her mother, and we don't have a last name for the mother. But we do get information. This is to certify that I have heard evidence in this case, and there is no doubt but that Frances Beatty was born in slavery prior to the Civil War, and therefore a certificate is issued accepting his most probable birth date as August 1st, 1887. And that is a certification from a doctor. On the backside at the bottom, we see that Frances Jones has been employed in my house. This is from Mr. Seeley for 22 years. And this is where it got a little confusing because Frances on the first page was spelled with an I, and the doctor says his. But in this particular case, Mr. Seeley is saying, I talked to her then and made inquiries and satisfied myself that she was born 4 years before the beginning of the Civil War. We've seen the actual certificates, the delayed birth certificates, but here is an application for a delayed birth certificate. And this is for Ida Johnson, and she is from the state of Washington. And we get her father's name as well as her mother's name. And they are using a page from a family Bible to document her birth. The first birth is for that of Mabel Johnson, an older sister, born in 1882. And then we see the line for Miss Ida Johnson and Miss Pearl Johnson, who was a twin. And they were born on the 2nd day of March in 1885. And we see successive births within the family. We also get lengthy testimonial letters. William Jones, of the age of 63 years, a resident of Clarkston, state of Washington, being duly sworn, says that as a young lad that is over 50 years of age, he lived on a ranch known as Lewiston Flat, Washington, and that he remembers having neighbors, Joseph H. Johnson and Teresa Johnson. Said neighbors were no relatives. In the spring of 1885, that is, on March 2nd, 1885, said Johnsons had born to them twin daughters, Ida and Pearl. Said William Jones was not present at the birth, but he and his mother visited said Johnson home shortly after, in fact, the next day, and said mother attended said infants, as no other person had been present at the said birth, but said infant's father and mother. And the place of birth is known as the Lewiston Flats, and it goes on. There were at the time 4 little girls, Mabel the older, Ida and Pearl twins, Josephine, and family history information. And it does continue on the following page. There is the testimony from Teresa Johnson, the mother, that Pearl and Ida were born twins on that March 2nd of 1885. And the state registrar is certifying that the attached application for the delayed certificate of birth was filed in 1941. Here again, that Social Security timeframe, and is advocating that a birth certificate be issued. And we see at the bottom that an order for registration of birth has been completed and filed. This one was a particularly interesting case. This is from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it is for Jenny Hughes Hodgson. And she is the daughter of George Hodgson and Martha Elizabeth Nelson. She was born on January 12th, 1880, and the application is being made in June of 1937. So she's 57 years old at this point. And it looks relatively straightforward at this point. But then we see other information. The state of Virginia, she personally appeared before a notary public, and that I am the widow of the attending physician, Dr. J.J. Nelson, who was her uncle. So we're getting family relationships here. And in 1937, Cora Nelson is certifying the birth. But we find some letters. Dear Sister Jenny, I want to write you tonight so that you may receive it on Christmas Day. And my design is that I may present you and dear cousin Stephen, as far as I have not already done so, on this joyful Christmas season with our dear, sweet little girl, Jenny. She is a Christmas present to you both. Don't think I do so with any hesitation or reluctance, for I feel most grateful to you both, and for what you have done already for the dear little thing, and for what you promised to do. I think it would be cruel and unjust to my child to hesitate for a moment when you express the wish to adopt her for your own. I think it's the best and wisest provision I can possibly make for her present and future welfare, inasmuch as it only requires my acquiescence. I sincerely trust, dear Sister Jenny, that the dear little maid may be the worthy recipient of the loving care bestowed upon her. And there is a second letter, corresponding letter, that is going back. My dear Maddie, yours informing us of our most acceptable, valued, and pleasing Christmas present reached us on the 26th. Words are inadequate to express our gratification at receiving a gift we have both desired so much. You will judge of our appreciation of your generous gift by the care with which we hope to guard and cherish the same. With God's blessing, we hope our possession of this coveted treasure may be altogether for good, good for those who give it, good for the recipient, and most of all, good for the one most concerned. God bless her, and God bless her parents. So in this case, we see where, oops, I apologize. Jenny Hodgson was born Hodgson, but she is being adopted by her aunt and uncle, the Hughes family. And we are getting the change of name and birth information. So we've seen some delayed birth certificates. We've seen applications. Here is an affidavit of birth from Iowa for Eva Lena Hoff. And her parents are William, and I can't read the mother's name other than Walker. And she was born in August 18th of 1864. And we have an affidavit of an attending physician, midwife or parent. And in this particular case, it is a midwife, Mrs. J.C. Lamar, in 1936. Here again, Social Security time frame. And we do find Ms. Hoff in the census, the 1880 census, and she is 15 years old. So we do know that it is indeed the right person with her parents, William and Isabel. Here is an example of an Iowa delayed birth registration. But the young man was born in Canada, Alberta, Canada. And in a kind of double information, we see that Ernest Marion Adams is being sworn in for the birth of Denver Harrison Adams, who turns out to be his son. Ernest Marion Adams was a physician, and he is certifying he was the attending physician at the birth of his son. Another international birth, but recorded in Iowa, is for Sadie Ruffman, who is now Mrs. Shirley Bass. So not only is her surname changed with her marriage, but also her first name. And she was born in Russia in 1910. And we have her signature on the application. And other than being international, we do see relative common certifications. They have her marriage record from Lynn County, Iowa in 1933, her voter registration record in 34, an insurance record, and a school record from as early as 1918. And all three of these documents certify that she was born on February 12th in 1910 in Russia, and who her parents were. You might also find additions and corrections. Here is an addition for Frank Forrest Brown. He was actually born on November 2nd of 1863, but the date of this particular record is June 3rd of 1901. He was born in Abington, Massachusetts, and it gives the names of his parents, Edward and Sarah Stoddard. And they used this information, the addition and correction, to actually update the town register. The bottom line indicates that Frank Forrest Brown was born on November 2nd of 1863, but the date of this particular record is June 3rd of 1901. So they updated the town register to reflect his 1863 birth. Among these records, you also might find additions in terms of deaths and death certificates. Here is a whole page of copies of records of deaths that were from the town of Medford, Massachusetts in the year of 1890, one of those critical years where the census is missing. And all of these people died in November and December of 1890. And likewise, this is from the additions and corrections, but each one of these would be entered in the town record in the appropriate area. Here is another from the town of Abington, a correction to a death record rather than just an addition. And the date of death is March 2nd, 1871. But the date of this recording is January 7th of 1910. And at this particular point, we are probably getting Mary Churchill's maiden name, Grosier, and that she was married, her age, the consequences of her death. Correction made in accordance with affidavit of Otis Churchill, her son, made in January 1910. And this is then recorded in the other books. Sometimes names are changed. Child may be born and a birth certificate may be issued for instance, in this case, Vivian Idell Hamrick, who was born on April 8th of 1916 in Palo Pinto County, Texas. And her father's name is listed as Hiram Jerry Hamrick. But we are getting a change. And this is in 1978. Her name, she is now Opal Catherine Hamrick, a significant change. And the correction to her father's name, Hiram. Actually, I would think that the first name, the Hiram, would be the more valid, but they're saying Hiram for his correction. And this is based on an affidavit from Lucille Cox and a family Bible record in possession of a family member. So we don't think about name changes. Here is a letter, and it is from Frances B. Washington, and she is more than 21 years of age, and she is the mother of Henry W. Shields, a lawyer who now resides at number 208 West 141st Street in the borough of Manhattan, New York City. And she is certifying that his father was Anderson William Shields, and that he died in May of 1903 in Mississippi, and that she subsequently married a Robert Washington and is now his wife. But she's getting her son's birth, Henry W. Shields, certified in her affidavit. I don't know what his original birth might have looked like, or if indeed there was one. This is the case that I'm not particularly sure about, why all of these births are being registered. I have a series of, I believe there are 5, and they are all being written in September, on September 12th of 1916 by John Pishu. And this is a case where he is certifying the birth of his father, John Alsop Pishu, in November 30th of 1796, and that he is the son of Frederick. And Frederick was the one that actually died in 1832. So to perhaps certify some form of heirship, I don't know what the circumstances are, but John Alsop was the father of John Mason Pishu, and this is his actual application or his certificate of birth. And note that these are appearing as certificates, not as delayed certificates, even though they are being issued in 1916 for people born in the 17 and 1800s. Here is his birth certificate for July 16th of 1841, and his parents. And then we have the birth of one of his sons, Edward Mason, in 1866, and he is still alive. We have the birth of another son, John, too far, John Alsop Pishu in 1868. And we also get a delayed one for their mother, Mary Lucy Duval. So here again, don't completely understand the relationship here, but all of these are from 1916. So either lineage or some form of heirship. Here is the one for certifying that the birth is a legitimate birth. I, Hal Brewer, for the purpose of making legitimate the hereafter named child, and for the purpose of making said child capable of inheritance, my real and personal estate as provided by law, do hereby execute and file this declaration in the offices of the Judge of Probate of Conecuh County, Alabama, as provided, etc. And the child is Pete Brewer, being a male child of the age of 13 years. The mother of said child being Quinnie Lee Rayleigh. So an important heirship application and certifying that the child is a legitimate child. And the judge accepts this information and issues a birth certificate. The records that I've looked at were all found on Ancestry. Family Search does also have a very few records. They are arranged by county, and some of them are online, but others of them you need to actually go to a family history center to look at. They do also have books with extracted informations, and they do have the indexes for delayed birth certificates. Here is an actual abstract from the 1899 to 1900 series, and we see simply that these children with the surnames beginning with A, the years that they were born or the dates that they were born, and simply their fathers and mothers' names. Let me get this right. Okay, this is the correct one. This is a petition for a delayed certificate of birth for a Pink Washington Barlow. He is a male child born January 5th, 1881. His parents' names. And we have a Bureau of Vital Statistics birth certificate. It was mailed to him on September 9th of 1949. And it came from a probate judge. So this was a court proceeding. And we have the decree establishing the birth of Pink Washington Barlow and a certification of the record by the court. And just the simple cover information that an application was filed in August of 1945 before the judge. And the delayed birth was recorded and a certificate was issued. Here is another application to register or correct a birth record, and it's from Ohio, and it is for Harold Franklin Beam, and he was born on April 22nd of 1904, and it gives his father's name, Harry G. Beam, his mother's name, Zeta Routson Beam. I apologize. And we see from the affidavit that his mother is his sole surviving parent, Zeta, and she is certifying that she was present at the birth. And we also have a certification at the bottom from an aunt who was supposedly present at the birth. And we have a journal entry for the hearing to, here again, before the court, to get Harold Franklin Beam a birth certificate. And his mother and his aunt are applying for this. His father's name is recorded. His mother's name is recorded. Apologize. We also have a record for Minnesota for an Amon Timothy Kronk. And in this particular case, it is his brother, an older brother, who is certifying his birth. giving the parents' names. And H.O. Kronk is certifying that he has known his younger brother virtually all his life. And we see also that we are getting additional information for Mr. Kronk. We are having a marriage record, a birth certificate, an affidavit, and let's see, he's various ages from these documents, but all lining up with the said date of birth. And it's interesting, the letter from the head of the Sioux Falls, South Dakota Police Department, Office of Fred W. Searles, Chief, affidavit signed by Herman Ostland, Acting Superintendent, Bureau of Identification before a notary public, and set forth in said affidavit that the ink not being visible on the family record, it had to be brought out by ultraviolet ray light. The name of Amon T. Kronk, born January 22nd, 1879, appears on said record. So here's an unusual way to certify the family Bible record didn't have, wasn't clearly visible. So they went to above and beyond to get it. And I apologize, this record is out of sequence. This one refers to Mr. Beam again. In proofreading, I discovered that this was out of sequence. But the important thing on Mr. Beam, who was born in 1904, was the certification of his parents' marriage. And this is what this particular letter is, that the judge is looking, judge of the probate, and it is for the projection of the parents' marriage in 1900. So here's another one from Alabama, that I, Willie Clyde Davis, hereby declare in writing that I am the father of a male child born out of wedlock to Phoebe Elizabeth Waller on the 15th day of April in 1942, and that the said child was named Willie Clyde Waller. And the child was 10 days old. So here again, we get a father acknowledging the birth of his own son, even though it is an illegitimate birth. And we get the record of the proceedings to legitimize the child's birth. Here's one from Illinois for Hattie Mae Cox, her information, and it is based on her sister's testimony. I'm going to briefly go through. This is one for Louis Nathaniel Berge, and he is requesting a birth certificate, and based on his life insurance, a marriage license. So we see a much more informal way of certifying the information. Here's one for a child that was simply noted as female on her birth certificate. And we're going through and we're going to correct and amend that certificate and get her name, Marvell and Villa Baumgartner, on the certificate, as well as her parents' names. And she was born in 1901, but this is 1942. And we see that the information, the name of the child was not in the record, the name of the father was listed incorrectly, the nativity of the parents was not given, so all of this information is now corrected. So we've seen a number of different forms of records. So don't overlook delayed birth certificates. I did not expect to find the name changes and the corrections that might have been done on birth certificates. It's important to remember that the delayed birth certificates are filed separately from the regular birth certificates, and that many are issued starting in the 1940s. Many of the ones that we've seen this morning do come from that time frame. It's also important to remember that they may be filed where the person resided. We did see quite a number of those rather than exactly where the person was born. So with that, I wish you good luck in your research.
Thank you, Terri. Very interesting topic. Wonderfully put together as usual. It just, in hearing some of the things that you'd shared, it seems like a lot of times with genealogy, sort of the further you get into it, the more mysteries or other topics that might come up you weren't even aware about. And a couple of those that jumped out to me today were the case of the Francis with the different spellings and the different reference to gender. That would be rather confusing. But then I'm glad that you noted that sometimes the delayed certificates are not even noted as that, but as just certificate. That would make it confusing. Yeah, so thank you. The other thing that I found that interesting, that a baby was given as a Christmas present. I've never heard of that before. That was a neat series of letters.
So yeah, you never know what, as you just pointed out, when you start digging into genealogy, number one, you never know what you're going to find. And number two, for every person you find, there are a lot more questions.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. A couple of quick announcements. We do have our community coffee coming up. It is on May 29th, 9 a.m. down at the museum. It's a free community event. The topic is going to be swimming pools of the area. So if you have any memories of swimming or just want to hear the stories, come on down. And then also one more thing, we'll be closed May 25th. That Saturday, May 25th, will be closed for the Memorial Day holidays. Thank you.
So, and I want to advertise the next session. I will be talking about the Civilian Conservation Corps, and this will be a live genealogy program at the Royal Gorge Museum. It will not be a Zoom presentation. So hope to get to see you then. Thank you so much and have a good weekend.